Under the oak tree. When Maxi saw the man at the fore, she sank to the ground in relief. She kept her gaze focused on Rifton, who looked capable of overcoming any obstacle without fear. Though they had spent only 3 weeks apart, the separation had felt like months. Rifton reached the gates and appraised the black-robed knights. Beneath his dark, wind-tousled hair, a pair of icy eyes narrowed menacingly. "I didn't think I'd have guests while I was away. What do we call uninvited guests?" Rifton raised a hand. The Remdragon knights swiftly surrounded the enemy, the swords in their hands gleaming brilliantly under the sun. "Trespassers, sir." "Thieves, more like." The knights chimed in as they reined in their excited steeds. Maxi watched the confrontation with bated breath. The black-robed knights, who had seemed so self-assured earlier, now looked uneasy. Rifton spurred his steed to get closer. "You had the nerve to come to my land and cause a ruckus. For that, I'll make sure to have, in honor of his boldness, foolishness, and disregard for life, engraved on your tombstone." Rifton's voice was soft as he made the chilling statement. As he drew his sword, the assailants' faces went pale with fear. Their leader quickly lowered his sword and addressed Rifton. "I am Lord Rob Midahuz of Kaisa, a nobleman of Livadon." "A lord?" Rifton paused and raised an eyebrow. Encouraged, Rob began to speak with more confidence. "Your people have offended me by questioning my identity and refusing me entry. This little scuffle got slightly out of hand, that's all." "A little scuffle, you say," said Rifton ominously, taking in the battered gate and the injured guards on the ground. Rob's face stiffened. "I apologize for letting my anger get the better of me. Why don't we end things here? I'm sure you wouldn't want things to get more unruly than they have. This means war." Rifton's calm voice sent shivers through the crowd. He slowly approached Rob Midahuz, grinning like a wolf baring its teeth. The Remdragon knights, who had the intruders hemmed in, parted to make way. Rifton's face betrayed no trace of concern as he continued. "You came to my gates with your men and attacked. What could that mean if not war? In response, I'll cut off your head, ride to your land, and reduce it to ruins." "Do you mean to break the armistice between the 7 kingdoms? Our king won't forgive you. You lost its protection the moment you destroyed my gate." A chill ran through Maxi's body, and she wrapped her arms around herself. Rifton's manner reminded her of the calm before a storm. Rob Midahuz went pale as if he had also sensed impending doom. He hastily made to retreat, but before he could go far, Rifton blocked his path with a sword. With the panicked look of a cornered rat, Rob Midahuz cried out, "I have hundreds of knights in Kaisa who are pledged to me. If you kill me, it really will mean war." "I very much look forward to it," said Rifton, raising his sword. Ruth dashed toward Rifton, shouting, "Sir Rifton, you mustn't kill this man if he really is a nobleman. It's best to deal with him after we've confirmed his identity and sent word to leave a dash." "Are you questioning my decision?" Rifton asked, impervious to the sorcerer's urgency. "War only brings loss. It's best to follow protocol and receive compensation." "I disagree," Rifton answered coldly. "Protocol? I can just invade his land and pillage everything there." He seemed unconcerned about the 30 knights before him and the hundreds more he would find in Kaisa. Ruth let out a sigh. "We truly will find ourselves in conflict with Livadon if we do that." Ruth trailed off as he glanced at Maxi, who had been hiding behind the guards. "Must you sully the eyes of our esteemed ladyship any further? You should show her the essence of a knight's chivalry." Rifton furrowed his brows and followed Ruth's gaze. When he saw Maxi slumped on the ground, his eyes widened in shock, and his impassive face turned hostile. He glowered at Ruth. "Hell, why is my wife here?" "It's only natural that the lady of the castle should handle disputes while her husband is absent." Ruth was unfazed by Rifton's wrath. Rifton gritted his teeth. In a flash, he had the tip of his sword on Rob's neck. "Surrender your weapons and dismount your horses. I'll let you keep your heads if you don't resist." "Let me go. I'll leave immediately and never dash. You want me to release you after attacking my land?" Rifton angrily cut him off. "You shall either die here or surrender. Now choose." Rob frantically assessed the situation. His knights were completely surrounded. Realizing that they stood little chance of victory, he threw his sword onto the ground. When his knights followed suit, Rifton signaled to the guards, "Bind them and toss them in the dungeons." Maxi released a sigh of relief, astonished that Rifton's arrival had put an end to the confrontation so quickly. A guard helped her to her feet. "Are you all right, my lady? Are you hurt? What were you thinking?" Maxi froze. When she looked up, Rifton was towering over her on his horse, his back to the sun. His face was difficult to see, but she could tell that he was furious. She shrank back in fear and began to stammer. "I heard there was a problem. And what the hell could you have done?" Maxi's blood ran cold. She quickly lowered her head to hide her shock. Rifton, who had treated her with such kindness before he left, now wore an expression so icy that she felt as if the breath had been knocked out of her. "I." She bit her lips and desperately tried to think of an answer, but her mind drew a blank. She heard Rifton emit a stream of curses over her head before she was suddenly lifted off the ground by the waist. She shrieked as Rifton placed her in front of him on the saddle. "I'm heading to the castle first," Rifton said to the knights. "Clean up this mess." And without waiting for a reply, he took off. Villagers who had gathered to watch from afar scrambled to make way. Maxi clung to Rifton's armored chest with her eyes squeezed shut. The arm around her waist tightened, the cold forearm armor digging into her side painfully. "He must be angry because I interfered when it wasn't my place." Maxi's entire body shook. Enraged men frightened her, and she felt faint at the thought of such an immense man admonishing her. Violence was not the only thing she feared. Seeing the man who had been so kind to her suddenly turn so cold made her heart ache. Suppressing the urge to beg him not to hate her, she clutched his cloak. They soon reached the castle. Rifton dismounted before helping Maxi down. But instead of setting her down, he continued to carry her across the garden, ignoring the servants who had rushed out to greet them. "Send Talon to the stables," he ordered in an icy voice. Rifton strode into the great hall. Maxi looked up to study his expression, but he marched on without sparing a glance at the space she had spent weeks renovating. She could see that he was livid. She swallowed hard before opening her mouth to speak. "Rifton, please put me down." "Shut your mouth." Rifton climbed 2 steps at a time with Maxi in his arms. Though he had traveled for days in full armor, he showed no sign of fatigue. Only when they reached the bedroom did he finally set her down. Maxi tried to find her balance as Rifton's eyes bored into her. Was he going to berate her now? Would he strike her? But she had only tried to settle a conflict as the lady of the castle. Clutching her dress, she was about to speak when something abruptly entered her mouth. Her eyes widened. She felt a cold, armored hand slide behind her head before grabbing her by her hair to pull her in. Sweet, chapped lips rubbed against her own soft lips, and a wet tongue slid inside her mouth. Maxi gripped Rifton's arms. Her heaving chest was pressed tightly against his armor, and the stubble on his chin chafed her skin painfully. Gasping for air, she looked up with quivering eyes to see Rifton's cold, hardened face staring back at her. "What were you going to do if I hadn't arrived just then?" he snarled. "I didn't think they'd break through the gates." He grabbed her face, and Maxi shuddered as the cold steel touched her skin. You shouldn't have been there in the first place. Rifton cried, his voice growing louder. You should never, ever put yourself in danger. Do you understand? Maxi quickly nodded, which seemed to placate him. He relaxed his shoulders and let out a long sigh. After hesitating for a few moments, Maxi caressed his chin. Rifton leaned his finely shaped forehead against hers. His hair smelled faintly of grass, and Maxi wondered if he had slept in a meadow the night before. I felt my blood run cold the moment I saw you out there. Damn it. I didn't ride day and night to come find you like that. I'm sorry. Rifton's face grew serious again. If I had arrived just a second later, things could have been much worse. Amidst. I didn't mean to distress you. I'm sorry. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Show me. Rifton stared at her hand for a moment before undoing the knot binding the armor to his arm. After removing the vambrace and gauntlets, he threw them onto the floor and pulled Maxi's face closer to his. Like a moth to a flame, Maxi's gaze became fixed on Rifton's dark eyes. Hot, calloused hands grazed her cheeks and disheveled hair. Her breath quickened, and her heart began to race. Every night that he had been away, she had curled up alone in their spacious bed, missing him terribly. I want to see it with my own eyes, Rifton said in a low voice, caressing the soft spot behind her ear. His hands slid down to push her robe off her shoulders. Maxi shivered, though she wasn't cold. In fact, she could feel sweat trickling down the back of her neck. His muscular body emanated heat from beneath the cold armor, igniting a spark inside her. He slowly slid her dress off her shoulders. Her body shook like a dragonfly caught in a spider's web. His dark eyes moved steadily from her pale collarbone to her chest, which were still covered by a thin chemise. Maxi felt breathless. A head for every scratch. What? I'll cut off a head for every bruise I find on you. Hearing Rifton whisper such words so gently made the fine hair on her body stand up. It was a stark contrast from the fiery temper he had shown earlier. That's one head, Rifton murmured, pointing at a small bruise on her forearm. Maxi tried to cover up the mark. This is from when I bumped into a shelf in the library. Don't lie. It's not A.O. Rifton gently kissed the bruise. His wet lips made soft pecking noises as they moved down her arm. When he reached the spot on her wrist where her erratic pulse could be felt, he bit down gently. Then, he wrapped an arm around her hips and lifted her off the floor. Maxi instinctively clung to his neck, her chest just below his head. He pressed his lips to them as he strode to the bed. Rifton, I promise I'm not her. I told you. I'll confirm that myself. Rifton strode to the bed and gently lowered Maxi onto it. Her dress was bunched around her waist. He pulled it off and threw it on the floor. Clad only in her chemise, Maxi looked down nervously. Rifton removed her shoes before lifting the hem of the chemise. When his hand grazed against the scrape on her leg, she felt a sting and reflexively tried to pull her leg away. I got this when I tripped over my own foot. This just sealed their death sentence. Rifton's eyes grew frighteningly dark as he examined the wound. Maxi held his arm firmly. It doesn't hurt at all. Please don't kill anyone. They not only tried to raid my land, but they even tried to harm my wife. Killing them and their family isn't nearly enough. If I don't make an example out of them, this could happen again. But you've only just returned. She had not meant to whine, but the words escaped her lips before she realized it. Flustered, she jerked her head down, unsure of where she should rest her eyes. She squeezed her eyes shut and blurted out, "You'd have to leave again if war broke out, then I'll be all alone again." Damn it, Rifton muttered under his breath. He pulled her down toward him and kissed her with such fervor that she thought he might devour her. Maxi moaned into his mouth. As he pushed her head back, her body arched backward unsteadily. Rifton raised her chemise to her waist and stroked her hips. The coldness of his armor and the searing heat of his hands made her head spin. Maxi clung to his neck with shaking breaths. His tongue, which had been roving inside her mouth, slowly slid out to lick her wet lips. When he looked down at her, his black eyes were full of desire. "The things you do to me." Maxi pulled him closer, letting out a soft moan. She brushed her hands against his bronze neck before combing them through his thick black hair. It was a strange feeling. She felt both powerless and hedonistic at the same time. Rifton's eyes clouded over as his hands began to move more urgently. Unable to contain himself any longer, he suddenly pulled her into a crushing embrace. The chill of the armor against her skin sent a tingling sensation up her ears. "These past few weeks have felt like years. You are all I could think about." Rifton put his mouth on her without a moment of hesitation. She instinctively squeezed Rifton's head with her thighs. He seized her ankles to hold her legs open and continued to caress her with his tongue. Though this was not the first time that he had used his tongue, Maxi felt overwhelmed. Panting, she hungrily accepted his tongue as heat coursed through her. She moaned softly at the sensation of his soft hair tickling her thighs and the sound of his uneven breaths. Just as she was about to reach, Rifton stopped. "I'll be inside you soon enough." Maxi began to rock her hips urgently. Seeing her plea, Rifton stroked her gently and swiftly undid the straps of his trousers. As he lowered them, something rigid sprang out from beneath. But Maxi had little time to feel embarrassment. Unable to contain the heat surging through her body, she pulled Rifton closer. When he brought his hips to hers, she rocked her lower body and rubbed herself against his hardness, frantic with desire. "Damn it!" Rifton grabbed her hips to put them in position and plunged into her, making her legs spasm and jerk. His hardness thrust into the deepest part of her before slipping out swiftly. Maxi desperately clung to him. Rifton let out a low moan before thrusting into her again. After the long break from engaging in such acts, Maxi was hungry for more. A little more, and a little more. Crushed by the weight of Rifton's cold armor, she urged him on by rocking her hips faster. Rifton devoured her flushed body with flickering eyes, his lips a-quiver. But soon, he was the one being devoured as Maxi wrapped her legs around him and tightened herself. She surprised herself with her own hunger. Rifton let out a long exhale. "I swear, the things you do to me." Rifton. Maxi looked up in exasperation at Rifton, who appeared to be trying his best to restrain himself. She had wanted him to take her with greater urgency, to crush her like a man blinded by desire as he had done in the past. And so she used her legs to pull him in deeper. Rifton drew a sharp breath. His restraint snapped, setting his desire loose. And like a horse galloping through the fields, the silver-plated giant began to thrust into her like a madman, tearing apart her delicate body. Maxi's hunger grew. With his face flushed and his eyes clouded with longing, Rifton looked beautiful. When Maxi caressed his face, he pulled her to him by the waist and crushed her lips against his.